All right, welcome to the 34th call for the Wharf Project. We'll follow along in our traditional fashion that seems to have established itself, go over some updates on what has been happening, and then just see where the conversation goes. So, um, diving straight into updates, documentation is basically ready to publish. That's what I have up on the screen right now. We've done content proofreading passes and like grammar checks and all this other fun stuff that is a little bit more mundane. The bulk of the content is written. There's still just a little bit sitting out there. You can see in the sidebar right now the contract kit documentation alongside the account kit documentation. And there's one more section coming right now, which is there's going to be a new under utilities. There's going to be a documentation section for the command line library. Um, we have a couple more documents that are coming down the pipe for things like the resource provider specification, some plugin development stuff, I believe. I'll have to double check on that one. I know we talked about it. I don't know if it's in scope or not. Certainly we'll
I
need it
think I
at
might
some
have
point.
missed. I think I might have missed the command line utility. What
Yep.
does that, if you don't mind, just quickly, like, what does that allow you to do?
I will jump right into that after this. That was kind of my next topic.
Uh,
um, but yeah, we'll have documentation for that. Uh, Basically, to wrap this side of things up, we're probably going to pull the trigger on this week and publish it to the website. And the content for the contract kit page is done, as well as the account kit page. We're implementing the account kit page. And once those are done, those will be published as well, hopefully within the next couple days. Last I knew, the content, like I said, was completed on the account kit and it was passed off for development and implementation. But we are quickly knocking out milestones at this point. So now that the documentation's out of the way, because of how much it's just taken so long because of how much effort it takes. I think we're somewhere between 30 and 40,000 words for the documentation right now. That's almost the size of a novel, which is pretty cool. And there's probably still some weak points that could be enhanced to make it even more clear on how to use some of these things. But we are, I think, out of the into the clear for most of the documentation. There will be a new section at the top for starter kits soon. We're starting to look at starter kits now that we're able to assemble this stuff. The releases that are just hanging out in the wings will be probably released at the same time we do the website update. Um, there are a couple new packages coming along. We just started on account creation stuff this week. It's a wrapper in the UI to enable some of the account creation services. The scope of the project was basically that we need the UI to be capable of doing this sort of thing, and that we were going to implement our account creation system into one of these plugins to serve as kind of both an example as well as a functional thing. We have our account creation system on Unicove. And let me just log out of my test accounts. And it's basically just a pop-up that lets you go through the account creation process, and ours is a paid service. So this will bring this service into Wharf. Then if other people build other account creation services, then they'll be able to use this and leverage this to do account creation. We're looking at ways to make it so this works with Jungle. So that way there's just a way to automatically create a Jungle account through the user interface. We could also expand that to potentially other test nets. Um,
like, how
yeah.
does that work? Like, when you're not on mobile, because on mobile, obviously, it uses like the app store, right? The normal credit card when you make
Our
payment.
process for our creation, the little pop-up I just showed, we use
Yeah.
Stripe for the payment processing on
Okay,
our
got it.
end.
Yeah.
So
So,
it's,
like, I
yeah,
mean, like from the user experience, they're just putting in a like either credit card or whatever Stripe supports.
yep,
Like, I don't know, like
yep.
if you
And
offer
if there's
more.
chains that offer free account creation, like their plugins could be created for that. Similar to how this one will work. We should probably add gray mass into the name of this one and make it not so generic. But yeah, like I know Telos has a few ways to do free account creation, and I'm not really, I don't know how they work right now. They might CAPTCHA or do email registration or something. But they'd be able to use the same approach to build a plugin that then any application would be able to drop into their app and offer creation services like that. So basically, our
And is it
goal is
configurable?
just to create the
Like,
platform. Hmm?
and is it configurable? Because you said you might rename it to Gray Mass Creation Plugin, but is the plugin currently configurable like how we have like, Anchor Link used to allow you to, provide kind of like a different CB, like a callback,
Mm-hmm.
address? Does this support something similar, or like, assuming you build it whatever is needed to mimic the response of what the plugin expects? Does that work? Is it,
I think
documented, for example?
this one will be specific to ours because we have we have a product or a platform that we built. It's all closed source and it all uses a lot of our stack. So I don't think this one will be editable to do other services, but other services could just make their own plugins. They wouldn't be
Right.
too hard to build. That's what this plugin template is going to be for. It'll define the interfaces and like here's what Wharf will provide as inputs, and here's what Wharf will expect as outputs from your platform. And then you need to be that middle service that facilitates the creation.
Right. That's what I was actually asking about.
Yeah, I don't.
Handle it in the template.
Yeah, and none of our stuff is, like I said, open source at the moment. It's all like tied into our Stripe accounts and our payment processors and our Slack and our Anchor infrastructure and some other things. So we could look at maybe open sourcing some of that. So it is an example of how that could work, but that's not part of the
As long
agenda
as
or the
it's
roadmap.
like, as long as there's some type of, in the template, like, like at the end of the day, there's a few ways to skin a cat.
Yeah.
Like, I don't think it's an issue as long as it's obvious what we need to be returning to the plugin, and or even like configure that. It's
Yeah.
it's not
Terrible saying.
Yeah, right. But and then on that, like there's an API that's needed. Like somebody's going to have to build an API that facilitates that because the plugin's not the thing doing the account creation. The plugin is just kind of a wrapper that knows how to facilitate the user interaction with that API. So some challenges to solve on that end, but certainly
it's the same server. It's like the same server that's going to create the accounts is the same server that is, or it could be, that receives payment and verifies and
yeah. And that's part of that will be the complication if we ever try to open source or use our stuff as illustration, because our payment platform and our account creation service is also what we use in Anchor on iOS and Android. When you do an in-app purchase on Anchor iOS, for example, it uses our same account creation platform. So it's just all like it was the path of least resistance to build this payment processing platform for all of our apps. And there's a web version as well.
Yeah, no, that makes sense.
So we're talking, this is out of scope, but we're talking about adding a Jungle plugin as well that can just do creation. I guess quickly, before I get into that, because I do want to get into the command line tool. We are making progress on the atomic asset side of things. Last I knew is most of the API calls work. There's not a published release of this yet. We are still working on a lot of typing because the API itself does not match the ABI from the smart contract in a lot of instances. And so there's been a lot of manual tweaking that needs to be done to make it so that the Atomic Assets API responses come back in appropriate types and in ways that you'd expect them. Uh, that front being made, hopefully we'll have an initial release in the not too distant future. This is one of the lagging projects for milestone number 6 that we have one developer on it full time, and the rest of us are engaging with it as needed to help that progress. So it's moving. I don't know if we mentioned it last time, but we did get the common library updated, so it will know chain specific responses for account requests. That's built in here now. The command line tool we'll get into in just a second. 2 new libraries, Protocol ESR and Protocol Scatter. Protocol ESR now has all of the functionality that the Anchor plugin had, and most of the functionality was moved out of the plugin. So if somebody else, I think the Hypha wallet and a few others might be using ESR. If we go to build plugins for them, now they can use this as a dependency and they will get all of the code we wrote for our plugin. Our plugin is more of a skeleton that brands the ESR experience now. So creating a wallet plugin Hypha that it uses this as a dependency will now be a lot easier, and there will be less copying and pasting between the plugins. Same with Scatter. We updated the Wombat, Scatter, and Token Pocket plugins to all use this protocol Scatter as a dependency now. These plugins are all really, again, just shells that brand that protocol experience. And now if there's another wallet that uses that protocol, they can just go and kind of use this as a guidepost. And then the function calls they need will come from this library. So it abstracts what it takes to build these plugins and just makes it that much easier if they are based on one of these 2 protocols. So that should be a big win for anybody using those protocols. And anybody that is building a new protocol could always make their own library as well. But these were part of milestone 9, I believe. I don't have it in front of me. But we've checked these off as complete. And we are moving on the educational materials still. There have been a few things that have gotten in the way. One of which was like, how do we document account creation? And new developer coming in, they're like, I want to use Wharf. How do they get their account? We didn't want to be like, oh, go to, download Anchor and then create a public key and then go to monitor.jungle.whatever and paste in your key and then use the faucet, all that stuff. So one of the things we did over the last week was we have this command line tool, which has been out for a little while now. You can run it through npx. This generate command has been there. This is what generates contract code, but we just added 2 new options, one called keys and one called account. Keys, if you run keys, will just make you keys. Previously, if a developer needed to make keys, it was like, okay, how do you do that? It was somewhat difficult unless you had a wallet that allowed you to create keys. I know there's a ton of guides out there that is like, here's how you use Anchor to create keys. And you go into the keys section and you click create keys and then copy them out and all that. This is just a command line tool that will use the same libraries that Anchor uses to randomly generate keys. So any developer who needs keys, this is a much easier approach than saying, hey, go download Anchor or go download Wallet or go to this website. So the other thing is now we have this account command, which if you just run with nothing else, will create you a Jungle account. Nothing needed. This uses our APIs. It uses our platform. It's going to create you a GM account on Jungle. And then it's just going to give you the keys. You can import these into any wallet that supports it. You can then just use the private key signer in Wharf to test your application with. But it will just create accounts. We don't have any sort of protection on this right now. So it's Jungle. We don't really care a whole lot. The only abuse is if somebody runs this a billion times and our faucet runs out, essentially. We have limited it. I think there's only 500,000 jungle or EOS tokens on the jungle network. So, they're not worth anything. Is it jungle for EOS?
I want to chime in and applaud this because I absolutely love this.
I agree. I think we should have done this a long time ago. I am slightly concerned about somebody malicious just abusing the thing, but
that sounds like a good problem to me.
Yeah, if somebody wants to. I don't know why it's not finding the account. Unless it's just the block.
I can tell you, just go back to the URL.
Yeah.
Go /account. So in the URL after the search results. Yeah, the reason for this is the way.
Yep.
It's just the way EOS diffuse names can be delayed of like account names, so it won't show up in the search, but it's available.
Cool. Well, that helps. This is exactly what I wanted to show. It's just the account exists. We staked 100 tokens to the account, 95 for CPU, 5 for network. That is a transferred resource. They can unstake that and get tokens if they want tokens for some reason. There's 50 kilobytes of RAM, which should be, I think, enough to deploy a contract. I don't know. You guys tell me.
I think it makes sense to have some liquid right away, because then they'll have to wait some time if they're trying to test their contract.
True. We don't have that feature in our account creation platform right now, but maybe there's a way to do that.
The stake isn't actually going to do anything, is it?
What do you mean?
It's not going to give them any resources.
On Jungle,
because
due to its usage, it actually does. No, it was delegated to the account with the transfer flag. So this is their tokens now.
Okay.
I agree, though. Having a liquid balance would be really helpful. It's not something we built into our account creation platform. We already had the ability to stake to an account with the transfer flag. And without too, it doesn't matter. But so this was literally just me typing in some text inputs to be able to enable this. So yeah, we have account creation through the command line now, which I think is pretty powerful. You can also use this command, I think. Yep, you can specify a chain, which the only chain right now is Jungle 4. We could talk about adding like Wax testnet and Jungle or Telos testnet and other testnets if we want. We would just need a pile of tokens on those networks. And then the .g or the GM premium name, because right now we're kind of hard coded to use that. There's room to improve this in the future, but that's where we are now. So you can specify a chain. Right now it is just Jungle 4. We don't need to do that. But you can also specify a name, like if you wanted to test whatever .gm, it has to be a GM again, another limitation of just us going quickly. Or you can specify if you want a specific key, like if you wanted to make a new account with, we'll just use that key as an example. So you can specify all these parameters as a developer, like if you have a specific key you want, a specific account name you want, or if it's a specific chain. But just for the easy purposes of like, I need an account, you don't need to specify anything. We'll randomly generate it all and just give it to you in the end. So this is what we're going to use for our tutorial for the Wharf. Like, here's a guided tour of everything, and this will be one of the parts of that video. Is like, okay, let's get started on Jungle 4. You need to use this command line tool to set up your account if you don't have one already. So it should be a really short video, hopefully useful, and then quickly get them into like, okay, you've got your account. We don't need to focus on any of that nonsense. Now let's talk about Wharf.
I guess you can also use it for, like, say deploying something new to test. You could just boom, create a new account and do it as part of your pipeline.
Yep. That's actually one of the other features we're talking about potentially adding to the command line tool is the ability to upload a contract. So that way you don't need a wallet or something else. It's
It would
out
be
of
great
scope
if it
of.
also does Clio stuff while you're at it.
Yeah. Yeah, it would be nice if it could
Because,
push
like,
transactions, and I think setting
or at
contracts
least
is probably the
get
first part.
transactions.
What was it?
You know, like, or at least you know the basic functionality of Clios in terms of reading data.
Yeah.
Like a lot of times, I'm always like using my, to do just quick things to check a table or an account or something, because there's no Clios
Yeah.
for M1 Mac, at least a recent version, which you don't really need, but like it would be nice having something that's like works on silicon chips and gives you the basic functionality, not Node EOS, but like basic Clios
Yeah.
functionality.
Very much agreed. And I mean, this is only going to be for people who have Node installed of some kind. You got to be able to run npx, or you got to be able to install it. But there is the possibility that we could bundle this up using Dino or potentially Bun or something like that. So that way you could just you wouldn't need Node.js installed. You could just run this on any Linux or Unix-like environment. The executable obviously would be like 40 to 60 megs or something, because it needs to bundle Node.js in
So
there.
incredibly likely that they'd have Node though.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Unless
or at least can get it
unless
easily
they're
rendered,
not. Yeah. Unless they're not a JavaScript developer, but even then it's easy to add. I mean, if they're in the command line, it's likely they have Node.js.
The only time I've seen that the bins were really useful for like CI scripts and stuff like that. But since a lot of them are containerized and they can build off of images that already include Node, even that I think is like a stretch to need.
Yeah. So this was, I think, pretty cool win. And if I guess here, if you haven't seen it before, generate. This is the generate command. You specify an API endpoint. You need to connect to a blockchain somehow, and we don't judge that. We might be able to make this a chain option someday. But then you specify a contract name. On Jungle 4 right now, this to-do app 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 is where we have our example that we're going to run off of for our tutorial. So just as context as to what this is, this account on Jungle. And this generate command will go out and it generates the TypeScript for that contract. So this was the original reason we built the command line utility, was so that way you could go through and embed everything for your contract in your application. It has the ABI itself as the raw compressed version, so that way you'll never need to fetch your contract. It's got a contract class that knows how to work with your smart contract. You can see we have 4 actions right now in our to-do app sample: add, erase all, and set complete. So now you can call contract, action, add. TypeScript will know the options. Then TypeScript will also know the data parameters, which are all defined down here. It automatically creates interfaces for inputs that know the data types. So it knows that you're using the right data types as you're working with these in your application. And then it has all of the types defined as structs for it as well. So it knows how to interpret, get table row responses, and do action creation. So this is the heart of the contract kit. And you just run that command, and then whenever you need to update it, you just run it again. The command also has an output option. You can do file, and then let's just call it to-do.ts. And what that does is just outputs it to a TypeScript file. So now you can look at the TypeScript file. So this should be very useful to work into build scripts. Like, let's say you're doing some sort of continuous integration or continuous deployment for your application. You could just have these generated, within your build process, however your build process works, and then keep your app in sync with your contract. And then, like, let's say you have a front end application and you update your contract. If you ran this and now the TypeScript updates in the front end application, if the contract changed and broke your application, TypeScript would know. Like, it'd be like, oh, there's a new required field on this action that you haven't updated your application with. TypeScript, when you try to compile it, it's going to know because of all these interfaces and all these types. So lots of benefits to working with your contract in TypeScript using the contract kit, as well as the command line interface tool. So we'll continue to add additional features to this. Additional features are very welcome if anybody wants to contribute to it. If I just jump over to it, it is a very simple command line application. We have it so that each command is its own folder, and each folder is essentially its own mini application. So this is the one that generates keys. It's super simple. We have a helper log method that is used to output on the screen. There's a few things that would need to be added so the app is aware of what the commands are. Like, you can see we add these prompt calls. We're using Commander to manage the command line interactions. So adding a new function is literally just writing a new program command and then telling it what function to call and then calling it from one of these folders. So super simple, does its job, and gets out of your way. But contributions very welcome if there's something cool you want to see. Otherwise, just let us know. You can open an issue on the command line application. Yeah, it all lives here. I don't know why this is...
I noticed it currently, like, kind of, the WharfKit envelope.
Yes.
Okay. And any plans to include other kind of libraries, I guess?
Like what?
Like, I'm thinking basically if you want to do the, like, kind of like adopt something similar to Kleos, something similar to Kleos, like say after you did that create account, you might want to do like a get account, for example, from the API. Any plans to do something of that sort for the CLI?
Not yet, but it's definitely something we could talk about doing. Like building, I'd love some alternative to Kleos as well. I have a really old version installed on my Mac. I'm still on an Intel Mac, so luckily it still works. But this being in a more universal environment with less dependencies than Kleos has, there could certainly be a CLI git command, like there is a Kleos git command, and then like a whole hierarchy structure behind that.
I think in general, there's really no reason that Kleos has to be written in the way that it is currently, like a C++ program.
Yeah.
It doesn't make enough sense for it to be limited like that.
And I think the obvious choice for where the replacement goes is JavaScript.
Absolutely.
It's probably the second best environment in terms of SDKs and completion.
The first.
I would say C++ because you can just include the headers.
Oh, I see what you're saying. I would say it's the first best environment globally, though, outside.
Yes. Yeah, I would agree with that too. So it does make sense to have to phase out Kleos to C++ and move it into a Node.js context, especially if we can get this wrapped in some sort of self-executing binary, so that way people without Node.js can use it as well.
Yeah.
So,
especially if somehow you have like also, the concept of a session or something else where you can interact with the chain.
Yeah.
Using that binary, or using that CLI.
Yeah, I think, and same goes with set contract. We'd need some sort of keyos replacement, something that holds keys, or maybe this could have some sort of key storage mechanism where there's a file in your home folder that's encrypted. What was that?
WharfKit private key plugin.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a matter of where do you persist those keys, unless you want to just like prompt for the keys, every time you run something.
Yeah. I mean, if you just wanted to have it within this section, that's not a problem. You could just persist it in RAM, but long-term storage, I don't think it really matters. Even the way that KeosD works, it's not hard to replicate.
Yeah, definitely. So, and then, yeah, you're absolutely right, though. Like, as soon as we want to perform actions, then we would include the session kit in here, and then we'd use the wallet plugin private key to load those keys and sign transactions. And we could add the resource providers in here. So like Fuel could cover some of these transactions, and like anything that you'd be able to do in a web app, you'd be able to do in this command line interface too.
Right, and I guess like a power user, so to speak, like if I want to do a transfer or if I want to do something quick or whatever it is, then I'll just do it using, like the CLI versus like opening Anchor or using Unicove or like opening something else, basically. Like I always have my terminal open,
Yeah, same here. So
looking at this long term, I'd love to also see two things on top of this. One would be something which is a little bit more like hard hat for Ethereum, where you have something which is like your contract development kit that sits on top of all of these tools. And then the other thing would be something like Scaffold ETH, which is basically you could just do create EOS app, and it would include that framework as well as like a Next.js or a Svelte kit or some front end component which has all of these tools and the way that you use them already built into some kind of starter kit. Because now we're starting to get into a position where we have all of these good tools that all of the networks basically say, hey, here's the de facto new stuff. And then we just need to build really easy, quick start stuff on top of it.
Yeah. And it could, like you were talking about scaffolding, in the JavaScript world, or in the TypeScript world, I guess, we do have, like, we're using straight up TypeScript to generate, like the TypeScript factory is what's being used to generate all the code. Daniel and our team has become pretty proficient with TypeScript code generation through TypeScript, which like anytime that we need changes made, I have to go to him because this stuff gets really complicated. But we could do the same sort of scaffolding with smart contract code. I mean, that's beyond me.
Also the other way around. So I like the idea of having some kind of framework on top of this that not only takes that stuff that way, but also goes the other way around and says, hey, you just generated the type from your contract. We're going to now take that to generate Tailwind CSS components for your front end as well, so that you can have like a GUI to build with.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be awesome. So walking back to kind of the conversation or the question that sparked all of this about having this, the command line tool wasn't in scope for Wharf. We knew that we needed code generation as part of the contract kit, and that was in scope. But we thought it was just going to be part of the contract kit originally. So now we have wandered outside of scope to create this independent command line application that now does account creation and key generation and some of these other things. So everything else we're kind of talking about currently is out of scope in terms of the Wharf project. It's not that we don't want it.
I think there's enough stuff I think there's enough stuff now that is quote out of scope that it might warrant like a talk with the ENF about, potentially adding another mandate for these additional scopes.
Yeah. I know, because this project is funded by the coalition. The ENF administers the funding, but all of the funding came from the 4 chains. So we would have to like raise that up. Well, first of all, we'd probably have to come back and create some sort of new document that's like, here's all the things that we discovered we could do that are out of scope that would benefit the community. Assemble that into some sort of document again, and then come back at the coalition and be like, hey, here's some new stuff, or potentially directly to the ENF or specific chains. As it stands with the current meetings, it doesn't seem like there's any additional funding for stuff like this, but we
Right. That's why I kind of like said ENF, because even under the coalition, they took the biggest burden in terms of like this, how much they're contributing. So one way or another, it's kind of like the ENF's kind of voice, I would say, is probably like like has a lot of weight there.
Yeah, it's a big chunk of it.
Yeah, and I think if you throw in, like, you can tell the ENF is super all about the EVM, and that's part of why the Auto OC is coming and a lot of these additional things. Have some, and that's also out of scope. But if you have some things that could benefit, that could be like something that will almost like could be built just like to exclusively benefit EOS or somebody running like a clone of that EVM, and then might be able to easier justify the kind of like how they do builds in the US, and they say, oh, this is for infrastructure, and then they bundle in all types of additional shit.
Yeah.
You can have a score feature and additional useful features that might benefit maybe non-EVM users, but it still benefits the whole library like as a whole.
It's definitely something we can look at next year.
Yeah. I don't even know why Kleos is not offered like as a standalone, because my understanding is it doesn't have any dependence. Problematic with like the silicon,
Yeah. I mean, this is all it uses, so.
Yeah. No, I meant like Kleos itself as well. Like,
yeah.
Like it's bundled now as part of the whole thing, but I think like the Kleos build stuff. I forgot what was the issue. It didn't work in the silicon. I think it had to do with like something being like very changed in Mac, like where they have to kind of bundle their own library. I'm really not sure, but I think Ross asked at some point in the node operator call, and I think Kevin said it's not supported on silicon, but it should work. Like, maybe not node EOS, but like it should build. But I want to ask you about that, but I forgot. But either way, like a lot of people would want to use the CLI to interact, and they don't care about node EOS. They're not interested, like like any wallet for obviously like basically like a light wallet, right, where you're not trying to run the chain, like you're just trying to query and interact with it.
And then you end up using curl most of the time, which is not friendly. You have to know the syntax of these calls, and when you're doing get table stuff, like you're copying it out of Chrome, and it's just like it's difficult to use it if you can't use Kleos or something like that.
Right. And obviously like Wharf would be like better than Kleos, at least in terms of what it offers.
Yep.
And you get that additional advantage outside just compatibility.
Yeah, and we can leverage all the SDKs we've written to make it fairly simple to actually build those commands too. Like if we did a CLI get table call, we could just use the table class and make it really easy, just interpret whatever it is you're typing on the command line to do that query.
Right, and potentially, I don't know, like you can autocomplete and go wild with it.
Exactly. So yeah, there's a lot of room for this tool to grow. I don't know what its future is beyond what we have now, but I'm interested in exploring it, and it seems like you guys are as well. So it's something we can, like I said, kind of push on either that towards the next year, or I don't know. When the actual roadmap is complete, which should be done in the next, our target is in the next couple weeks. Then we really have to start looking at what's next for both Wharf and then us internally as well. So,
Right.
cool. Well, that's all I had to really show about the command line tool. You can also install it locally. I guess that's the other thing. NPX, though, does the local install and just makes it that much easier to run. So, good stuff. Other stuff. Documentation. We have the tutorials, the command line tool. I mean, I think that's the bulk of what's going on. I gave you some updates on some of the other SDKs. Yeah, I don't know that a whole lot beyond that has happened. Expect a lot of updates very soon, especially in terms of documentation and some new releases of the various plugins and kits and other parts like that soon as well.
Awesome.
Is there anything specific you guys wanted to dive into beyond all of that? I don't know what you just said.
Said nope, sound great.
Cool. I heard that. It was just real quiet, which is fine. Cool.
Yeah, it sounded from like next room.
Yeah. Cool. Well, we can, I guess, end this one early if we don't have anything else we necessarily want to talk about. And catch up again next week.
Sounds good.
Awesome.
Thanks.
Thank you. Stopped the recording. Awesome. Well, if you guys need anything, feel free to reach out.
Sounds good. Thanks.
Thanks, Aaron.
Yep. Later, guys.